The city above was silent, but beneath its cracked streets and forgotten subway tunnels, a secret war was stirring. The infection had taken everything, the vibrant life, the laughter, the normalcy. What remained were the infected, soulless, ravenous creatures who prowled in the open, hunting for any sign of the living. Humanity's last flicker of hope rested underground, where the resistance had built their hidden stronghold. In a dimly lit chamber, beneath layers of concrete and steel, Elena adjusted the strap on her worn leather jacket. The faint hum of generators mixed with muffled voices in the background. Around her, other fighters checked weapons and supplies, eyes sharp, muscles tense. This wasn't just another mission, it was the beginning of something dangerous, something that could tip the balance in their favor. Elena's fingers trembled slightly, but her gaze never wavered from the map spread out on the metal table. Red markers pulsed where the infected swarmed above ground, while green dots flickered where resistance members moved unseen. "Commander," whispered a voice behind her. It was Lucas, her second in command, tall and steady with a scar tracing his cheek. "Intel confirms a supply drop tomorrow, near the old subway junction. But it's crawling with infected." Elena nodded. "If we don't get those supplies, the whole sector goes dark. No food, no meds, no fuel. We lose that, we lose everything." She looked up, meeting the eyes of the others gathered in the room. The weight of leadership rested on her shoulders, but in this moment, she felt something else, hope. Because they were planning to fight back. Above ground, the city lay in eerie ruin. Crumbling skyscrapers cast long shadows, and once busy streets were now silent graves. The infected shuffled through the debris, their groans echoing off shattered windows. They moved like a wave, relentless, unthinking, unstoppable. But the resistance had learned their weaknesses. They studied the infected, mapped their patterns, and trained relentlessly to exploit every advantage. Elena and her team weren't just survivors, they were warriors fighting for humanity's future. Tonight, they would strike at the heart of the infected territory, the old subway junction where the supply drop was expected. As the clock struck midnight, the underground fighters gathered at the tunnel's entrance, their faces hidden beneath worn masks. The air was thick with tension and the faint scent of damp concrete. Every footstep echoed in the narrow corridor, a reminder that one misstep could alert the infected above. Elena led the way, her hand steady on the grip of her custom-made crossbow. Lucas followed close behind, carrying a crate of silent explosives designed to clear infected clusters without drawing too much attention. They moved like shadows, slipping through abandoned stations and dark passageways. Occasionally, distant growls sent a shiver down their spines, but they pressed forward. At one junction, they paused. Elena raised a finger, signaling silence. A faint scratching noise echoed from a nearby vent. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" whispered a new recruit, his voice barely audible. Before anyone could respond, a burst of movement erupted from the shadows, a group of infected lunged from the darkness. Elena's crossbow sang, arrows striking with deadly precision. Lucas tossed a smoke grenade, obscuring their retreat as the fighters ducked into a narrow side tunnel. The sudden attack reminded them how fragile their mission was. One wrong move, and they could be overwhelmed. They reached the supply drop just as the first hints of dawn painted the sky. Crates marked with the resistance emblem were stacked neatly, protected by silent alarms and traps the resistance had rigged days before. But something was wrong. The crates were disturbed. Footprints led away from the drop zone, not theirs. Elena's heart pounded. "They've been here," she said grimly. "Someone else knows about this." Lucas scanned the area with a handheld device. Traces of infected. And another human presence. Enemy scouts? Elena guessed. Could be. The risk was greater than ever. They couldn't afford to lose the supplies, but if enemy spies were nearby, walking into a trap was possible. Elena made a quick decision. "We take what we can carry and fall back to the tunnels." We'll set a perimeter and figure out who's hunting us. As they loaded crates onto makeshift sleds, a sudden rumble shook the ground. From above, the infected poured down through collapsed vents and broken staircases, their hunger undeniable. The fighters fired in unison, arrows, bullets, and makeshift explosives lighting up the dark tunnel. The battle was fierce and close, every second counted as they pushed back the advancing horde. When the last crate was secured and the infected driven off, Elena took a breath. "We made it," she said softly, but her voice betrayed the weariness beneath. Lucas approached. "We need answers. Who's spying on us? And why?" Elena's eyes narrowed. "Because the war isn't just with the infected anymore. The Resistance had enemies in the shadows, humans willing to betray their own kind, and possibly worse." But tonight, for the first time in months, Elena allowed herself a glimmer of hope. The Resistance was alive. They were fighting back. And in the darkness beneath the city, a secret war was just beginning. End of Part 1. How does this feel for your story start? If you like it, I can continue with Part 2 next, keeping the tension rising and the mystery deepening. The tunnels beneath the city never slept, but tonight they seemed especially restless. The faint hum of the generators was punctuated by hurried footsteps and whispered conversations. The supply crates had been hauled into the Resistance's hidden storage, but the uneasy feeling lingered like a shadow in the back of Elena's mind. She stood in the command center, a cavernous space filled with flickering monitors and maps pinned to steel walls. Lucas joined her, carrying a small device that scanned for energy signatures. "This thing picked up a signal near the old hospital," he said quietly. "Interference from some sort of transmitter." "Enemy comms," Elena replied. "We're being watched. Not just by the infected." The thought settled heavily on the room. The Resistance had always expected the infected to be their greatest threat, but now a new danger emerged, human adversaries lurking in the ruins, watching, waiting. Elena paced slowly, running her fingers over the rough map of the city. "We need to find out who's behind this. And fast." Outside, dawn bled through cracks in the surface, casting weak light into the underground tunnels. The city above was waking, but for most survivors, the streets remained perilous. The infected roamed freely, their numbers growing every day. But the Resistance couldn't stay hidden forever. They had to strike, to reclaim territory, to send a message: humanity was not finished yet. Elena gathered her core team for a briefing. The room was tense. Everyone knew the risks, but the stakes had never been higher. "We've got enemy spies in the city," Elena began, her voice steady but urgent. "They're using a transmitter near the old hospital to coordinate infected attacks and track our movements." Murmurs broke out. The old hospital had been a no-go zone for years, a crumbling, shadow-filled relic swallowed by decay and danger. "We're sending a team to disable the transmitter and gather intel," she continued. "Lucas, you're leading this one." Lucas nodded grimly. "We'll move fast and stay quiet." "Take Elena with you," a voice interrupted. It was Mara, the Resistance's intelligence officer, known for her sharp mind and sharper instincts. "You'll need her insight. And I want a full report the moment you're back." The team prepared quickly. Weapons were checked, supplies packed. Elena could feel the eyes of the others on her, some worried, some hopeful. She swallowed the weight of leadership and followed Lucas into the shadows once more. The journey to the old hospital was a dangerous dance through forgotten streets. They moved under cover of darkness, slipping past infected clusters with practiced ease. Every corner could hold a threat, every sound was a warning. Elena's mind raced with questions. Who could be behind the transmitter? Was it a rival faction? Betrayers from within? Or something worse? They reached the hospital's main entrance, a shattered shell of metal and glass, vines creeping through broken walls like grasping fingers. The building seemed to breathe with menace. Lucas raised a hand. Stay alert. They slipped inside, flashlights barely piercing the gloom. The air was thick with dust and the scent of rot. Their footsteps echoed softly as they moved through abandoned corridors lined with peeling paint and rusted equipment. Suddenly, a faint buzzing noise hummed through the air. Elena froze, listening. It was coming from a room at the end of the hall. Lucas signaled for the team to spread out. They approached the door silently, weapons ready. With a quick nod, Lucas kicked the door open. Inside, a small group of figures huddled around a makeshift radio setup, wires tangled like snakes. The men and women wore ragged clothes, faces smudged with grime, but their eyes burned with calculated menace. The resistance team didn't hesitate. They sprang into action, crossbows fired silent bolts, knives flashed in the dim light, and within seconds, the intruders were subdued. Elena scanned the captives quickly. One was a woman with a tattoo of a serpent coiled around her wrist, a symbol she had seen before, whispered among resistance members as the mark of the serpents, a ruthless faction rumored to ally with the infected for power. Why sabotage us? Elena demanded, stepping forward. Who sent you? The woman's eyes gleamed coldly. You think this is just about the infected? This city belongs to whoever survives. You, us, the infected, we're all fighting for control. Elena's heart pounded. The war wasn't just a battle of survival anymore. It was a fight for the soul of the city. Back in the tunnels, the resistance gathered their prisoners and disabled the transmitter. Mara was already waiting, eyes sharp as ever. We've got proof of the serpent's involvement, Lucas reported. They're using the infected as weapons to destabilize us, to control supply lines and territory. Mara nodded grimly. This changes everything. Elena met Mara's gaze. We need to strike at their base before they get stronger. Mara hesitated. Their base is in the old industrial district, heavily fortified and crawling with infected. Then that's where we go, Elena said, determination hardening her voice. If we don't act now, the serpents will turn the city into a slaughterhouse. We can't let that happen. The underground command center buzzed with renewed purpose. Plans were drawn, weapons distributed, and a new mission formed, a bold, desperate strike against the serpent's stronghold. As the fighters prepared to move out, Elena took a moment alone, staring at the cracked concrete above. The city was a battlefield, the infected and the serpent's threats on every front. But beneath it all, something stronger was rising, the unyielding spirit of the resistance. And this war was only just beginning. End of Part 2. Elena tightened the straps of her gear and took a deep breath. The plan was clear, but the danger was anything but. The serpent's stronghold lay in the old industrial district, a sprawling maze of rusted factories, collapsed warehouses, and abandoned machinery. It was a place swallowed by shadows and death, where the infected prowled in terrifying numbers and human enemies waited in ambush. As the resistance fighters gathered in the tunnels beneath the city, whispers of the upcoming mission rippled through the ranks. For some, it was the first real chance to strike back, for others, a final gamble. Lucas stood beside Elena, his expression grim but resolute. We can't afford mistakes. The serpents are ruthless. If we get caught, there's no coming back. Elena nodded. Then we move fast, hit hard, and get out. The journey to the surface was a slow crawl through narrow passageways lined with makeshift barricades and traps designed to slow the infected. When they finally emerged into the pale light of early morning, the industrial district stretched out like a graveyard of steel and concrete. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay. Broken machinery lay scattered among piles of debris, and vines crept over forgotten walls as if nature itself was trying to reclaim this forsaken place. Elena signaled the group forward. Stick to the shadows. Watch for patrols. They slipped between buildings, every sound amplified, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the distant groans of infected, the faint chatter of serpent guards. As they neared the heart of the district, the fighters came upon the first sign of the enemy's presence, a checkpoint guarded by two heavily armed serpents, their faces hidden beneath black scarves marked with the serpent tattoo. Lucas raised his crossbow. On my mark. The attack was swift and silent. Elena's arrow found its target before the guards could react, and the second fell under a sharp blade from Mara. The team moved quickly, securing the checkpoint and disabling alarms. But the brief victory was shattered by a chilling sound, the guttural roar of infected drawn by the noise. Elena cursed under her breath. We've been spotted. Move. They pressed deeper into the industrial maze, the infected closing in like a tide. The team fought fiercely, arrows and blades cutting through the relentless horde, but the numbers were overwhelming. Suddenly, a trap triggered beneath Elena's feet, a hidden pit filled with spikes. She barely managed to jump back as Lucas grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the deadly fall. Careful, he hissed. They know this ground better than we do. The fight became a desperate scramble through narrow corridors and rusted platforms, every moment a battle for survival. Finally, they reached the Serpent's base, a fortified factory with walls reinforced by scavenged metal and barbed wire. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements sharp and disciplined. Elena's heart pounded. We need to find the transmitter and destroy it. Mara, can you hack their systems? Mara nodded, pulling out a small device. Give me a few minutes. While Mara worked, Elena and Lucas kept watch, eyes scanning for threats. Inside the base, Mara's fingers flew over the device, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Guys, there's more. The serpents are planning a massive infected release. If they succeed, they'll wipe out half the city. Elena's breath caught. We can't let that happen. We need to stop it now, Lucas said. The team moved swiftly to the containment chambers, where infected were held in cages, their snarls echoing in the cold metal halls. As they sabotaged the cages and set explosives, alarms blared, a warning that their presence was detected. Serpent guards poured in, weapons ready. The fighters braced for a brutal showdown. Elena's crossbow sang again and again, while Lucas and Mara fought with knives and fists. The battle was fierce, the air thick with the stench of sweat and fear. Just as the fight reached its peak, an explosion rocked the building, Mara's explosives going off, shattering the infected cages. The released infected surged forward, turning on their captors and the resistance alike. Amid the chaos, Elena grabbed Lucas. We need to get out, now. They fought their way through the infected and enemy soldiers, retreating to the tunnels below. When they finally emerged back in the safety of the underground base, Elena collapsed against the wall, exhausted but alive. We stopped the release, Mara said, catching her breath. For now. Elena looked around at her team, wounded but unbroken. This war is far from over, she said quietly. But we've shown them we're not afraid. The resistance had struck a blow against the serpents, but the fight for the city's soul was only beginning. End of Part 3. Ready for Part 4. The quiet of the underground base was a fragile illusion. After the brutal raid on the serpent's stronghold, the resistance fighters returned with heavy losses, their bodies and spirits worn thin. Elena sat alone in a corner of the command center, her mind racing. The victory had been costly, and the threat far from over. Lucas approached, wiping grime from his face. We need to shore up defenses. The serpents will retaliate. Hard. Elena nodded, but her gaze was distant. I'm worried about something else. Go on. She hesitated, then whispered, I don't trust everyone here anymore. The resistance was a family forged in fire, but in times like these, fear bred suspicion. Rumors had started to circulate, whispers of a spy, someone leaking their plans to the enemy. Mara had caught 2 suspicious fighters trading with strangers near the tunnel entrance. Weapons and information changed hands in the dark. Elena summoned a secret meeting in the innermost chamber. The core team gathered, Lucas, Mara, and a handful of trusted fighters. "We have a mole," Elena announced quietly. "Someone is betraying us to the serpents." The room fell into tense silence. "We'll find them," Lucas said firmly. "And we'll stop them." Elena felt the weight of every eye watching her, weighing her words. Paranoia was a poison, but the truth could destroy them all. The investigation began immediately. Elena assigned trusted members to watch key points and intercept communications. Every message was scrutinized, every face was observed. Days passed. The city above was a silent battlefield. The infected roamed, but the serpents held their ground, emboldened and organized. One night, Mara called Elena urgently. "I found something," she said, voice low but steady. "Intercepted a message between serpent commanders. They're planning a strike on our base, in less than 48 hours. Elena's heart clenched. "How?" Mara hesitated. "They know our routines. Our patrols. They even have access codes." The truth hit like a punch. Elena called a full alert. Fighters doubled their shifts, barricades were reinforced, traps reset. But she couldn't shake the gnawing dread. If a spy was feeding the serpents inside information, every plan could be undone before it even started. She pulled Lucas aside. "I want to run a sweep through everyone's quarters tonight. We'll find the leak." Lucas frowned. "It's going to cause distrust. But you're right. We can't risk the base." That night, the Resistance's hidden home became a maze of suspicion. Elena and Lucas moved through the narrow tunnels, checking doors, searching for anything out of place. In one cramped corner, Elena found a small transmitter hidden beneath a loose floor tile. Her breath caught. The device was active, sending signals to an unknown location. She called Lucas over. "Found it." Lucas carefully disconnected the transmitter and examined it. "This is how they've been tracking us." Suddenly, footsteps echoed nearby. Elena's hand went to her crossbow. From the shadows, a figure emerged, Yarek, a fighter who had earned respect but was known for his reckless streak. "I'm not who you think," he said, voice shaking. "I never wanted to betray anyone." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Jarek's confession was a painful revelation. He had been desperate, his family trapped above ground, threatened by serpents. They forced him to feed them information, promising safety in return. "I hated it," he said. "But I had no choice." Elena felt a mix of anger and sorrow. The war wasn't just between humans and infected, it was also a battle of broken people, caught in impossible choices. "We'll deal with this," she said firmly. "But you're staying under guard until we're sure you're not a threat." As dawn broke, the base was tense but prepared. Elena knew the serpent's attack was coming, but she also knew that unity was their only chance. That morning, a small message crackled through the comms, a warning from an unexpected source: serpents moving in. Prepare for battle. Elena looked around at her fighters, weary but determined. "This is our home. Our fight. We hold the line." The resistance braced itself as shadows lengthened, the enemy approaching fast. End of Part 4. The air in the underground base was thick with anticipation. Every corner, every shadow, held the potential for violence. The resistance fighters moved silently, checking weapons, tightening barricades, and preparing for the assault that was inevitable. Elena stood at the center of the command room, maps and monitors glowing faintly around her. She could feel the weight of every life relying on her, every breath, every heartbeat mattered. "Serpents are advancing from the east and south," Lucas reported, his voice low but steady. "They're bringing infected with them." Elena nodded. "We'll use the traps we set along the tunnels. Funnel them where we want." She paused, meeting the eyes of the team. Remember, this isn't just about survival. It's about sending a message: the resistance will not be broken. Outside, the first sounds of the serpent's attack echoed through the tunnels: the crunch of boots, guttural snarls of infected, the occasional bark of a command. The enemy forces were relentless. Serpent fighters moved with ruthless efficiency, supported by waves of infected unleashed like living weapons. The base's outer defenses held for a time, but the pressure was mounting. Elena led a squad to reinforce the weakest point, a narrow corridor lined with sharp steel spikes and tripwires. "Hold this line," she commanded. "No one gets through." The fighters took their positions, eyes scanning the darkness. The first wave hit like a storm. Arrows and bullets tore through the infected, but the serpents pushed forward, their weapons sparking in the dim light. Explosions shook the tunnels as traps were triggered, sending infected flying into steel spikes and pits. But the enemy adapted quickly. Elena found herself face to face with a serpent commander, a towering figure clad in scavenged armor, eyes cold and cruel. Their blades clashed with a roar, sparks flying as metal met metal. Nearby, Lucas was pinned down, fighting off infected clawing at his back. Elena fought fiercely, her crossbow ready, but knowing this battle would come down to skill and will. Suddenly, the power flickered. The base plunged into darkness. A collective gasp rose from the fighters. Without light, the tunnels became a nightmare. Infected could move unseen, and the serpents used the chaos to press harder. Elena's heart pounded. "Light your torches. Use the flare guns." Flashes of fire pierced the darkness as fighters scrambled to regain control. Mara's voice crackled over the comms. "Power's out across the whole sector. Sabotage." Elena realized with dread that the serpents had planned this. The blackout was a strategic move, and it was working. Trapped in shadows, the resistance fought desperately. Elena managed to free Lucas from the infected swarm. "We need to get to the power core and restore the lights," she said. They made their way through twisting corridors, dodging infected and enemy fire. Every moment was a gamble between life and death. At the power core, Mara was already working frantically, her hands steady despite the pressure. "Give me a minute, almost there." A sudden crash echoed behind them. Serpent fighters burst in, weapons raised. Elena raised her crossbow. "Cover me." Bullets and bolts flew as Mara worked. Time stretched thin. Finally, the lights flickered back on, revealing the chaos around them. The resistance fighters rallied, pushing back the enemy with renewed energy. The tide was turning. Elena and Lucas fought side by side, their movements fluid and deadly. The serpents began to falter, their momentum broken. But the cost was clear. Many fighters were wounded or lost, and the base bore scars of battle. As the serpents retreated, Elena knew this was only the beginning. The war for the city's future was far from over. Back in the command room, Elena caught her breath. She looked around at the weary faces, friends, comrades, survivors. "We survived today," she said quietly. "But the serpents will be back. We must be ready." Lucas nodded. "We'll be ready. Together." Elena's eyes burned with fierce determination. The resistance was alive, and their secret war had only just begun. End of Part 5. The aftermath of the siege left the underground base battered but unbroken. The walls bore scorch marks, the floor was littered with spent cartridges and broken glass, and the air was heavy with the metallic scent of blood and sweat. Elena moved through the command center, feeling the weight of every lost life press down on her. The fight had been brutal, but the serpent's retreat was no sign of peace. It was a pause, a chance to regroup and strike harder. Elena knew they needed answers, and fast. Lucas approached, his face grim. "The serpents pulled back, but they're not gone. We picked up chatter about reinforcements moving in from the east." Elena clenched her fists. We need intelligence. Mara, can you trace those transmissions? Mara nodded, eyes scanning her screen. I'm working on it. But something else, there's an unusual signal pattern I can't quite decipher. Elena's brow furrowed. Could it be another faction? Possibly. Or a trap, Mara said sharply. The Resistance's fragile peace was shattered again when a scout rushed into the command center, breathless and wide-eyed. They've taken one of our supply caches near the river tunnels, the scout gasped. And there were signs of infected wearing makeshift armor. Elena's stomach dropped. Armored infected? That's new. The serpents must be experimenting. Lucas exchanged a dark look with Elena. They're evolving. Getting smarter. More dangerous. Elena paced the room, her mind racing. The serpent's tactics were shifting from simple brutality to calculated warfare. The infected were no longer mindless beasts, they were becoming weapons. That night, Elena convened a meeting with her trusted leaders. The dim glow of lanterns cast long shadows on the walls, matching the heaviness in the room. We have to adapt, Elena began. The serpents are changing the game. If we don't find a way to counter their new tactics, we risk losing everything. Mara spoke up. I've been working on a new communication network, secure, encrypted, and harder to intercept. If we can get it running, we can coordinate strikes more effectively. Lucas nodded. And we need to train fighters to handle armored infected. More precise tactics, heavier weapons. Elena looked at each of them, determination solidifying. Then that's our mission. We prepare for what's coming. Meanwhile, outside the underground walls, the city was shifting. Ruined buildings cast long shadows under the moonlight, and the infected roamed with a new, chilling awareness. The serpents were using the night as cover, moving supplies and weapons with careful stealth. But the resistance was watching. Scouts moved through the ruins, eyes sharp for any sign of enemy movement. One scout returned with news that sent a chill through the command center. There's a new leader among the serpents. Calls himself the Viper. Elena's heart raced. The name alone was enough to make her blood run cold. The Viper, Lucas muttered. A ruthless tactician. If he's leading them now, the serpents are in for a darker turn. Elena's resolve hardened. Then we need to find him before he finds us. The resistance had survived attacks and betrayals, but now they faced a cunning enemy with new weapons and a leader who was no stranger to cruelty. As the night deepened, Elena stared up at the cracked concrete ceiling of the underground base, thoughts racing through the dark. The fight was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. End of Part 6. Want me to continue with Part 7? The name alone sent a ripple of fear through the resistance, the Viper. Rumored to be as cunning as he was brutal, he had quickly risen to command the serpents, transforming them from a disorganized gang into a precise killing machine. Elena knew that finding him was critical, but it was also a deadly gamble. Intel places the Viper in the old subway tunnels beneath the East District, Mara reported, her voice tense. We have a narrow window before he moves again. Elena studied the map projected on the wall. The subway tunnels were a twisting labyrinth, perfect for an ambush. Then we take the fight to him, Elena said. But this time, we go prepared. She handed out new gear, armor reinforced with scavenged metal plates and weapons designed for close-quarters combat. The resistance fighters adjusted their masks and tightened their grips on rifles and blades. This mission was not just about survival, it was about striking a decisive blow. The team moved in silence, descending into the dark, damp tunnels. The smell of mold and decay hung heavy, broken only by distant echoes of dripping water. Every step was cautious, every shadow seemed alive. Lucas led the way, signaling stops and moves. Mara stayed close, scanning for any electronic signals. Suddenly, a faint hiss echoed ahead. Elena froze. Infected? Before anyone could answer, the tunnels erupted with movement. Armored infected charged, their heavy limbs crashing against the concrete walls. The fighters sprang into action, blades slicing through the thick skin, gunfire echoing in the confined space. But this was no ordinary attack. The armored infected fought with terrifying strength and coordination. They pushed the resistance back, forcing them deeper into the tunnels. Elena's heart pounded as she realized the trap. The Viper had anticipated their arrival. "We're surrounded," Lucas shouted, blocking a lethal blow with his makeshift shield. Elena ducked as an infected lunged at her, narrowly avoiding sharp claws. "Fall back to the junction," she yelled. The fighters regrouped, using the narrow corridor to their advantage. They set traps and flares, trying to slow the relentless advance. In the brief lull, Mara hacked into the tunnel's old electrical grid, sending sparks and small explosions down the line to disrupt the infected. "It's buying us time," Mara said, breathing hard. Elena took a moment to catch her breath, eyes scanning the shadows. Then she saw him. A figure stepped from the darkness, a man clad in black armor, a serpent tattoo coiling down his neck. The Viper. His smile was cold and cruel. "Welcome to my domain, Resistance. You've come far, but this is where your fight ends." Elena's grip tightened on her weapon. "You'll never control this city." The Viper laughed, a sound like steel scraping stone. "Control is an illusion. Power is what matters. And I have it." With a swift motion, he signaled his guards. Serpent fighters emerged from hidden alcoves, weapons raised. Elena's team braced for the final stand. The battle was fierce. Bullets flew and blades clashed in the narrow tunnels. The Viper fought like a shadow, fast, precise, and deadly. Elena met him head-on, their blades sparking with every strike. She could feel his strength, but also his arrogance. Lucas took down several fighters beside her, while Mara provided support, tossing grenades into clusters of enemies. Despite the odds, the resistance held their ground. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the tunnels. A massive infected, larger and more ferocious than any they'd seen before, was released by the Viper himself. Chaos erupted. The giant infected smashed through fighters and serpents alike, its eyes wild with hunger. Elena dodged its crushing blows, realizing they couldn't win by brute force alone. "We need a plan," she shouted. Lucas nodded, "Aim for the explosives Mara planted earlier." Together, they lured the creature toward a pile of barrels marked with red tape, volatile explosives scavenged from the city. As the monster lunged, Elena fired a precise shot, igniting the barrels in a blazing explosion that rocked the tunnels. The infected was thrown back, engulfed in flames, its roar fading into silence. When the dust settled, the Viper was gone, vanished into the shadows like a ghost. Exhausted but alive, Elena gathered her team. "We didn't get him," she said, voice grim. "But we sent a message." Lucas wiped blood from his brow. "And we're not done." Elena looked toward the exit, determination burning bright. The resistance was wounded, but stronger for the fight. The war was far from over, and the Viper's shadow loomed large. End of Part 7. Ready for the thrilling finale in Part 8? Let me know. The tunnels were silent now, the echoes of battle fading into a heavy stillness. Elena stood near the battered exit, the cold air from above brushing against her face like a promise, or a warning. The fight with the Viper had pushed the resistance to their limits. They had survived, but the scars were deep, both in the earth around them and in their souls. Lucas joined her, his face grim but resolute. "He slipped away, but we weakened him. The serpents are fractured." Elena nodded slowly. "His control depended on fear and chaos. Without him, there's a chance to reclaim the city." They looked out over the ruined skyline, the first faint hints of dawn breaking through cracked windows and shattered roofs. But even in victory, the resistance knew this was only the beginning. Elena gathered her fighters in the underground command center. Wounded but unbroken, they listened as she spoke. We've faced darkness and betrayal. We've fought monsters, both infected and human. But our fight is more than survival. It's about hope. She paused, eyes scanning the tired but determined faces around her. This city belongs to us. The resistance isn't just a secret war underground, it's a movement. Together, we will rise. Mara stepped forward, her fingers dancing over a map. We're setting up communication networks to connect with other groups across the city, survivors who want to join us. Lucas smiled faintly. We'll need every hand. Every voice. Elena's heart lifted. The resistance was no longer isolated fighters in the dark. They were becoming a beacon. Days passed as the resistance repaired, rebuilt, and planned. Supplies were gathered, new recruits trained, and strategies honed. Above ground, signs of life stirred. Small groups of survivors emerged from hiding, inspired by rumors of the resistance's victories. Elena knew the road ahead would be long and dangerous, but the spark had been lit. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena stood watch over the city's edge. The air was still, but alive with possibility. Lucas came to her side, handing her a worn notebook. Plans for the next phase, he said. It's time to take the fight beyond these tunnels. Elena smiled, a mix of exhaustion and fierce hope in her eyes. The resistance rises. And this time, the city will remember. As darkness fell, the first stars appeared in the sky, distant lights guiding a future forged in defiance. The secret war underground was over. The battle for the city had just begun. End of the resistance rises. If you want, I can help you develop this into scripts, dialogues, or other formats for your YouTube story. Would you like me to assist with that next?